The massive control room of the Stellar Empire's Shield Command buzzed with activity as operators monitored the shimmering barrier that protected their civilization. Through the vast observation windows, the energy shield sparkled like a web of golden threads stretching across space, connecting and protecting thousands of worlds. Admiral Marcus stood tall at his command post, his silver uniform gleaming under the soft blue lights of the control panels. His chest swelled with pride as he watched the daily shield strength report scroll across the main screen. For 300 years, the shield network had kept the Empire safe from all threats, and today was no different. Shield integrity at 100%. "Admiral," reported Officer Tom from his station. "All 67,000 connection points are stable, and power flow remains optimal." The Admiral nodded, allowing himself a small smile. The shield network was truly their greatest achievement, a barrier of pure energy that could be expanded or contracted to protect any part of their territory. It had taken their greatest minds decades to perfect the technology, but the result was worth every resource they had poured into it. "Show me the weapon test results from yesterday," Marcus ordered, though he already knew what they would reveal. Every week their enemies tested new weapons against the shield, and every week they failed. The main screen flickered to life, displaying footage of the latest attempts to breach their defenses. A barrage of antimatter torpedoes exploded harmlessly against the golden barrier. Quantum disruption beams, capable of tearing apart the fabric of space itself, simply dissipated into nothing. Even the new gravitational collapse weapons, which could crush entire planets, couldn't make the shield flicker. "The Outer Kingdoms are getting desperate," commented Captain Peter, walking up to stand beside the Admiral. That was their third weapons test this month. "Let them waste their resources," Marcus replied, watching another explosion bloom harmlessly against the shield. "They'll learn what everyone else has. The shield cannot be broken. Not by force, not by science, not by any means known to the galaxy." The control room staff worked efficiently at their stations, monitoring power flows and adjusting shield harmonics. To them, it was just another routine day protecting humanity's greatest achievement. The shield had become such a constant in their lives that many younger officers couldn't imagine life without it. A junior officer approached with the daily threat assessment report. "Sir, we've detected increased activity in the Earth sector. They're refusing our latest resource demands." Marcus waved his hand dismissively. "Earth is a minor concern. They have no technology that could possibly threaten us. Their strongest weapons are centuries behind our defenses." "But sir," the officer persisted, "our analysts report they're still using some primitive manufacturing methods. We don't have complete data on all their capabilities." The Admiral actually laughed at this, drawing attention from nearby stations. "Primitive methods. Officer, our shield can withstand the force of a supernova. Are you suggesting we should worry about a world that still works with metal and fire?" The young officer flushed and returned to his station. Around the room, others shared knowing smiles. The idea that anything primitive could threaten their shield was absurd. The barrier that protected them was the pinnacle of scientific achievement, the perfect fusion of energy and mathematics. As the day shift drew to a close, Admiral Marcus took a final look at the shield glowing in space. Somewhere out there, Earth and its colonies were probably planning some futile resistance to the Empire's demands. Let them plan, he thought. Let them scheme and build their weapons. Nothing could breach the shield. It was a simple fact of modern physics. The Admiral gathered his things and prepared to leave, completely unaware that at that very moment, in a humble workshop on Earth, someone was about to challenge everything he believed about the nature of progress and power. The shield continued its eternal sparkle, its golden light a constant reminder of the Empire's technological supremacy. But even the mightiest walls can have the smallest cracks, and sometimes the oldest knowledge can unravel the newest defenses in ways that no one expects. The rhythmic clang of hammer striking metal echoed through the small workshop on the outskirts of New Portland Colony. James wiped the sweat from his forehead and studied the glowing steel on his anvil. While massive starships passed overhead and people zipped by on their hover vehicles, he preferred the old ways, the way of hammer, anvil, and honest metal. His workshop was a curious mix of old and new. Traditional tools hung on the walls alongside modern safety equipment. A vintage forge burned hot in one corner, while advanced air filters kept the space clean and breathable. The floor was concrete, worn smooth by years of work, marked with burn spots and tiny craters from dropped hot metal. "Still playing with fire and rocks, old man," called out Rick, one of the colony's tech specialists, as he walked past the open workshop door. He carried a box of shiny new fabricator parts under his arm. James just smiled and returned to his work. The steel needed 3 more folds to reach the right pattern. He had learned this technique from studying ancient Japanese sword-making scrolls, though he used it now to make tools rather than weapons. "You know, a modern fabricator could make 100 perfect tools in the time it takes you to make one," Rick continued, leaning against the doorframe. "Perfect isn't always better," James replied, not looking up from his work. "Every hammer I make is slightly different. The tiny imperfections, the way the metal flows during forging, they give each piece its own character." Rick shook his head. "Character doesn't matter much when the Empire's squeezing our supply lines. We need efficiency, not character." James finally looked up, his weathered face serious. "Our ancestors built pyramids, crossed oceans, and reached the stars without fabricators. Sometimes the old ways have strength we've forgotten." The metal sang under his hammer as he worked it into shape. Each strike was precise, backed by years of experience and knowledge passed down through generations. While others rushed to learn the latest technology, James had spent his time studying metalworking traditions from Earth's past. Techniques from Africa, Asia, Europe, and the Americas. His workshop walls displayed his creations, hammers of various sizes, each with patterns in the metal that seemed to flow like water. Some were tools for other craftspeople, others were art pieces that captured the beauty of traditional metalworking. But lately, he had noticed something odd about his work. When he struck certain pieces he had forged using combined techniques from different cultures, they produced strange vibrations. Not the normal ring of metal, but something deeper, almost like the hum of energy shields on spacecraft. James set down his hammer and picked up his latest creation. It was a craftsman's hammer, but he had forged it using a blend of techniques: the folding methods of Japanese masters, the pattern welding of ancient Norse smiths, and heat-treating secrets from ancient Indian metallurgy. "Hey Rick," he called out before the tech specialist could leave. "Take a look at this." He struck a small portable shield generator they used for testing safety equipment. Instead of the usual dull thud, the hammer's strike made the energy field ripple strangely, like disturbed water. Rick's eyes widened. "That's not supposed to happen. Energy shields shouldn't react to physical impacts like that." James nodded slowly. "Been happening more often with pieces I forge using the old combined techniques. Something about the way the metal's structured, maybe. Probably just a defect in the shield generator," Rick said quickly, but his voice had lost its mocking tone. "You should stick to making garden tools, James. Leave the serious technology to the experts." As Rick hurried away, James turned the hammer in his hands, watching how the folded metal caught the light. There was something here, something important about the way traditionally forged metal interacted with energy fields. He might not understand the science, but 30 years of working metal had taught him to trust his instincts. He reheated the forge. There were more tests to run, more techniques to try. While the Empire's ships circled overhead, growing more threatening each day, James continued his work, folding ancient knowledge into every piece of metal he shaped. The local science center was usually quiet this late in the evening, but today it hummed with excited voices. Around a testing table, a group of scientists huddled, watching intently as James demonstrated what he had found. "Do it again," said Dr. Walker, her eyes fixed on the monitoring equipment. She was the center's lead researcher on energy field technology, and for the first time in years, something had genuinely surprised her. James nodded and lifted his specially forged hammer. The test shield generator on the table produced a small energy barrier, similar to those used in personal protection devices. With careful aim, he struck the edge of the barrier. The room filled with a strange ringing sound. On the monitors, the energy field's pattern shifted and rippled in ways the scientists had never seen before. The barrier didn't break, but it definitely changed. "Impossible," muttered Dr. Walker, checking the readings. "The vibration pattern is somehow matching the shield's frequency, but that should only happen with specialized electronic equipment, not a hammer." James set the hammer down carefully. "It's not just any hammer. This one's special. Made it using techniques from different Earth cultures. Japanese folding, Viking pattern molding, and some old Indian steel-making methods." One of the younger scientists picked up the hammer, turning it over in his hands. "But it's just metal. Shaped metal can't interact with energy fields like this. It goes against everything we know about shield technology." "Sometimes what we know isn't everything there is to know," James replied quietly. He took the hammer back and pointed to the patterns in the metal. "See these lines? They're not random. Each fold, each weld, creates a specific pattern. When they all work together—" Dr. Walker interrupted, excitement creeping into her voice. "The patterns must be creating some kind of resonance frequency, like how a wine glass can shatter if you hit just the right note, but much more complex." She turned to her computer and pulled up the analysis of the hammer's impact. "Look at these wavelengths. The vibrations aren't just hitting one frequency, they're hitting multiple frequencies simultaneously. It's like an orchestra instead of a single note." James hadn't understood everything about frequencies and wavelengths, but he knew metal. Each forging technique adds its own voice to the metal. Modern fabricators make everything too perfect, too uniform. But these old methods, they'd put tiny imperfections in the metal, give it character. The scientists spent hours testing the hammer against different shield configurations. Sometimes the effect was stronger, sometimes weaker, but it was always there. The traditionally forged metal somehow created vibrations that energy shields responded to. "We need to test this against stronger shields," Dr. Walker said finally. "James, could you make more hammers like this? Different sizes, maybe. We need to understand exactly what's happening here." Before James could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the colony. Everyone rushed to the windows. Above them, Imperial ships had appeared in the sky, more than usual. The Empire's demands for resources were getting more aggressive every day. "Their shields are the strongest in the galaxy," one of the scientists said quietly, "if they decide to attack." James picked up his hammer, studying the patterns in the metal that had taken him years to perfect. Maybe that's why this is important. Nobody expects an empire to fall to a hammer. Dr. Walker was already typing rapidly on her computer. "We need to keep this quiet for now. If the Empire found out what we've discovered, they'd never believe it anyway," James said with a small smile. "They're too proud of their advanced technology to think a simple blacksmith could find its weakness." As the Imperial ships loomed overhead, James headed back to his workshop. He had more hammers to forge, more ancient techniques to combine. Somewhere in humanity's ancient crafting traditions lay a key to defeating the Empire's supposedly impenetrable shields. The scientists returned to their instruments, trying to understand the impossible readings they were seeing. Outside, the golden glow of the Empire's shield network sparkled in the evening sky, still unaware that its greatest threat would come not from advanced weapons, but from the simple knowledge of Earth's past. The emergency alarms wailed across New Portland Colony as more Imperial ships darkened the sky above. The colony's main square was packed with worried citizens watching the massive vessels through the atmosphere dome. Their worst fears had come true. The Empire had begun its campaign of intimidation. Governor Ray stood at the command center's main window, his face grim as he read the Empire's latest message. Behind him, colonial officials rushed between stations, coordinating with other Earth settlements across the solar system. They've cut off the supply lines to 3 more colonies, reported his aide, Jack. Mining Outpost 7 just lost their food shipments. Mars Base reports their medical supplies are running critically low. The governor's fist tightened around the datapad. And their demands? The same. Total submission to imperial authority. Hand over 70% of all Earth's resources, except imperial governors in all colonies. Jack paused. They're giving us 48 hours to comply. On the main screen, tactical displays showed the Empire's shield network expanding, cutting off more trade routes. Like a golden web, it could stretch between their ships, creating impenetrable barriers wherever they wanted. Earth's colonies were being systematically isolated. "What about our weapons?" Governor Ray asked, though he already knew the answer. The military commander, Colonel Brad, stepped forward. "We've tried everything, sir. Laser cannons, plasma torpedoes, even our new quantum warheads. Nothing even scratches their shields." The room fell silent as another Imperial ship moved into position. Through the windows, they could see its shield connecting with the others, forming another barrier segment. Soon, Earth would be completely surrounded. "They're not even trying to hide their intentions anymore," Jack said quietly. "They know we can't fight back." A junior officer burst into the room. "Governor, Mars Base reports their water recycling system is failing, without replacement parts." He didn't need to finish. Everyone knew what that meant. Governor Ray turned to face his staff. "Options. We could try to negotiate," suggested one official. "Maybe if we offer partial resource rights." "They don't want negotiations," Colonel Brad interrupted. "They want complete control. These supply line cuts are just the beginning. Once they have us desperate enough." The colonel's words were cut off by another alarm. On the main screen, a red warning flashed. The Empire had just cut off the supply line to Luna Base, Earth's largest off-world settlement. 15,000 people on Luna Base, Jack whispered. Their air recycling systems need constant maintenance, without supplies. Governor Ray walked to the tactical display, studying the growing network of Imperial shields. Each golden line represented another choke point, another noose tightening around Earth's neck. Their mighty warships, the pride of Earth's defense force, sat useless in their docks. What good were weapons that couldn't penetrate a shield? "Sir," called a communications officer, "we're getting reports of panic buying in all colonies. Food shortages are starting in the outer settlements. Medical facilities are beginning to ration supplies." The governor watched another Imperial ship move into position. They were using their shield technology not as a weapon, but as a cage. No shots fired, no direct violence, just the slow strangulation of Earth's colonial lifelines. "How many people do we have in off-world colonies now?" he asked. "Over 50,000, Jack replied, all depending on regular supply shipments for survival. The room grew quiet as the implications sank in. 50,000 lives, slowly running out of food, medicine, and basic supplies, all because they refused to bend their knee to the Empire. "Sir," Colonel Brad said softly, "we need to make a decision soon. Some colonies have less than a week of supplies left." Governor Ray stared at the Imperial ships looming above his colony. Their shields sparkled mockingly in the sunlight, a constant reminder of humanity's helplessness against their technology. "Get me all colony leaders on a secure channel," he ordered finally. "And contact Dr. Walker at the Science Center. I want to know about any research, any discoveries, any possibilities, no matter how unlikely they seem." As his staff rushed to comply, he watched another shield barrier form in the sky. Time was running out, and Earth needed a miracle. Dr. Walker's laboratory had turned into an impromptu war room. Holographic displays showed test results from James's hammers, while scientists argued over complex energy equations. In the center of it all sat James's original hammer, surrounded by measuring devices and scanning equipment. "Show me the results again," Dr. Walker said, rubbing her tired eyes. She hadn't slept in 2 days, not since the governor had made their research top priority. Her assistant pulled up the latest test data. Each hammer creates a unique vibration pattern. The more traditional techniques combined in its forging, the more complex the pattern becomes. James stood in the corner, watching the scientists work. 3 more of his hammers lay on nearby tables, each made with different combinations of ancient forging methods. Each one could make energy shields ripple and distort, but none had managed to break even a small barrier yet. "It's the imperfections," said Dr. Walker suddenly, walking to the main display. "Look here. Every time a machine tries to copy these hammers, it fails. The vibrations don't happen with perfectly made tools." She pointed to microscopic images of the metal structure. The traditional forging techniques create tiny inconsistencies in the metal. Each fold, each hammer strike adds its own pattern. It's like a fingerprint. "But why do the shields react?" asked one of the younger scientists. "They're designed to stop everything from lasers to nuclear blasts." Dr. Walker smiled for the first time in days. "Because they're too perfect. The Empire's shields are pure energy, mathematically perfect barriers. But these hammers, they're beautifully imperfect. They create vibrations that aren't supposed to exist according to the Empire's theories." James walked over to examine the displays. He didn't understand the complex equations, but he knew metal. Each culture's forging technique adds something different. Japanese folding creates layers. Viking pattern welding adds strength. Indian wood steel brings flexibility. And when combined, Dr. Walker continued excitedly, they create harmonics that the shields can't properly process. Like trying to solve an equation with too many variables. A military officer who had been quietly observing spoke up. "Can we turn this into a weapon? Something our ships can use?" Dr. Walker shook her head. "That's what you don't understand. This isn't about making a bigger weapon. The Empire's shields stop weapons because they're designed to handle pure force, clean energy. But these hammers, they're like singing a complex song at a perfect crystal. Hit just the right notes. And the crystal shatters." James finished. "Exactly." Dr. Walker turned to the military officer. "We can't replicate this with machines. Every attempt to mechanically reproduce these hammers has failed. The vibrations only work when the metal is shaped by hand, carrying the tiny imperfections of human craftsmanship." The officer frowned. "You're saying our only hope against the most advanced technology in the galaxy is a hammer?" "Not just any hammer," Dr. Walker replied. "We need one that combines even more traditional techniques, something so complex in its imperfection that it can create harmonics the shields have never encountered." James was already heading for the door. "I'll need metalworking texts, everything we have on ancient forging techniques, African, Australian Aboriginal, Native American, all of it." "But the Empire's shields protect entire solar systems," the officer protested. "Even if this works on a small scale." "Scale doesn't matter," Dr. Walker interrupted. "The shields work by linking together, remember? If we can disrupt one section with the right harmonic pattern, the vibrations will travel through the entire network." James finished. "Like cracks spreading through ice." The officer looked between them, then at the hammer on the table. "The fate of Earth depends on a blacksmith with a hammer." The Empire would never believe it. "That's exactly why it might work," Dr. Walker said, already pulling up more research data. "They've built their defenses against the future, never thinking they should guard against the past." As emergency alarms continued to sound outside, James headed back to his workshop. He had forging to do, and ancient knowledge to weave into metal. The Empire's perfect shields were about to meet humanity's beautifully imperfect answer. The colony's main hangar buzzed with activity as engineers prepared the small stealth ship. Unlike the massive warships sitting idle in their docks, this vessel was barely larger than a cargo shuttle, perfect for slipping through the gaps in the Empire's shield network. James stood before the colony's leadership council, his new hammer hanging from his belt. The weapon looked deceptively simple, but it had taken him 3 days of continuous forging to complete. The metal held the combined knowledge of 17 different Earth cultures, each technique adding its own subtle song to the whole. "This is madness," said one council member. "Sending a blacksmith against the Empire's main shield generator. We should be evacuating our outer colonies while we still can." Governor Ray raised his hand for silence. "The evacuations continue, but we've lost contact with 3 more colonies since yesterday. Time is running out." On the main screen, tactical displays showed the Empire's shield network growing tighter every hour. Supply lines to Mars and Luna were completely cut now. Reports of food riots had started coming in from the outer settlements. "Dr. Walker," the governor turned to the scientist. "You're certain about this?" She nodded, pointing to her data. "The new hammer's vibration patterns are unlike anything we've ever seen. In tests, it disrupted shield frequencies we thought were unbreakable. If James can get close enough to their main generator—" "Getting close is my job," interrupted Captain Mark, stepping forward. A veteran stealth pilot, he had volunteered to fly the mission. "My ship's passive camouflage should get us through their outer defenses. After that—" He glanced at James. "It's all up to you and your hammer, Smith." James gripped the hammer's handle. The weight felt right, like the tool had been waiting all his life to be made. In its metal, he had folded techniques from Japanese masters, pattern welding from Norse smiths, heat treating from India, quenching methods from Arabic bladesmiths, African high heat forging, Aboriginal Australian surface hardening, and more. Each culture's knowledge was written in the steel, creating something both ancient and new. "The plan is simple," Colonel Brad explained, pulling up a hologram of the Empire's main shield generator. "Captain Mark's ship will approach under stealth. James will have a 10-minute window to reach the generator's core. One solid strike should create a resonance cascade through their entire network." "And if it doesn't work?" someone asked. The room grew quiet. Everyone knew the stakes. Earth's colonies were running out of supplies. The Empire's demands grew harsher each day. Without their shields, the Empire would have to fight fairly. And Earth's forces were ready for that. "I have a question," James said, speaking for the first time. "Not about the mission, but about the Empire's shield generator." Dr. Walker nodded for him to continue. "What's it made of?" The question caught everyone off guard. Dr. Walker checked her data. "The outer casing is a titanium steel alloy." "Why?" James smiled slightly. "Metal. No matter how advanced they are, they still need metal. And I know metal." The council chamber's mood shifted. Something about the Smiths' quiet confidence affected them all. "The ship leaves in 1 hour," Governor Ray announced. "James, Captain Mark, the fate of Earth and all her colonies rests on this mission. No pressure." As the room emptied, Dr. Walker caught James's arm. "The hammer's vibrations should disrupt their shields, but be careful. The resonance might affect other energy fields too. Your own protection could fail." James nodded, patting the hammer. "Sometimes you have to risk breaking to make something better. Every Smith knows that." He walked towards the waiting ship, past rows of useless advanced weapons. The Empire had prepared for attacks from the future, but their perfect shields were about to meet something they'd never expected. The combined metalworking knowledge of humanity's past, forged into one imperfect, beautiful weapon. Captain Mark was already running pre-flight checks, ready to make history. Smith. James secured his hammer, ready to remind the Empire that humanity's strength isn't just in our technology. Above them, through the hangar's force field, the Empire's golden shield still sparkled in space, unaware that their perfect defense was about to meet humanity's wonderfully imperfect answer. The small stealth ship glided silently through space, its advanced camouflage systems making it nearly invisible against the star-filled background. Inside, James watched as Captain Mark expertly navigated through gaps in the Empire's shield network. "Main generator coming into view," Mark whispered, though there was no one who could hear them in space. Old habits died hard. Through the viewport, James saw it, the heart of the Empire's defense system. The generator was massive, a space station larger than Earth's largest cities. Golden energy rippled outward from it in all directions, forming the basis of their entire shield network. Imperial patrols on standard routes, Mark reported, checking his sensors. We'll have a small window between shifts. Ready? James gripped his hammer tightly. The metal seemed to hum softly, as if recognizing its moment had come. Ready. Their ship slipped through a maintenance access point, landing silently in a secondary hangar. As they had hoped, the Empire's arrogance meant they barely guarded these areas. Why would they? Their shields made them invulnerable. 8 minutes until the shift change, Mark said, checking his timer. After that, they'll detect us for sure. James moved quickly through the station's corridors, following the memorized path to the generator core. His magnetic boots kept him stable in the low gravity, the hammer a comfortable weight at his side. He passed rows of humming machinery, each piece a testament to the Empire's technological advancement. Yet among all their perfect devices, they still needed maintenance hatches, access panels, and physical controls. They still needed metal. An alert sounded in the distance. They've spotted the ship. Mark's voice crackled through his communicator. You've got 4 minutes, max. James reached the main generator room. Through a massive window, he could see the core, a pillar of pure energy stretching from floor to ceiling, surrounded by a metal housing covered in Imperial tech. 2 guards turned, spotting him. Their weapons came up, energy bolts flying. But James was already moving, decades of forge work having made him stronger than he looked. He rolled behind a control panel as alarms began blaring throughout the station. Stop, one guard shouted. You cannot possibly harm the generator. Surrender now. James looked at his hammer, seeing the patterns in its metal glinting under the emergency lights. 17 ancient techniques combined into one tool, waiting to meet the Empire's perfect shield. He burst from cover, ducking under energy bolts. The guards' shots went wide, their training never having prepared them for someone simply charging forward with a hammer. James reached the generator housing. Behind him, he heard more guards arriving, their boots clanging on metal floors. Step away from the generator, someone ordered. Your primitive weapon cannot affect our technology. James smiled. They still didn't understand. He raised the hammer high, feeling the weight of Earth's combined metalworking knowledge in his hands. The strike rang out like a bell. For a moment, nothing happened. The guards began to laugh. Then they heard it, a sound like crystal starting to crack. The generator's hum changed pitch, becoming discordant. Impossible, one guard whispered. James struck again, and again. Each blow sent vibrations through the metal housing, the hammer's imperfect harmonics disrupting the perfect frequencies of the shield network. Through the window, he saw the golden shields beginning to ripple strangely. The perfect barriers were meeting something they had never encountered. The combined metalworking wisdom of humanity's past, transformed into pure vibrational energy. The shields, someone shouted over the station's comm. They're failing. All sectors reporting cascading failures. James struck one final time. The generator housing rang like a massive gong, and the sound of shattering filled space itself. Outside, the mighty shield network that had protected the Empire for centuries broke apart like glass. The golden barriers cracked, split, and dissolved into nothingness. In that moment, as alerts blared and Imperio officers stared in disbelief, humanity's oldest crafts had defeated the galaxy's most advanced technology. The Empire's perfect shield had been shattered by a hammer forged with the knowledge of Earth's past. James lowered his hammer, looking at the stunned guards. Sometimes, he said quietly, the old ways are the best ways. Across space, Earth's colonies celebrated as supply ships raced to deliver aid. The Empire's invincible defense had fallen not to advanced weapons, but to the simple wisdom carried in metal and muscle, passed down through generations of Earth's smiths. The hammer had done its work. Now it was time for the ships and soldiers to do theirs.